This could be the superfood that saves your life during the next crisis. It's probably the most nutritious food on earth that requires absolutely no refrigeration. This superfood was invented during the Cold War. In order to survive a possible nuclear attack, America needed a new kind of bunker food. The requirements were very daunting. This new superfood had to be extremely nutritious, incredibly cheap, easily reproducible on a massive scale, and long-lasting without refrigeration. After 5.5 years and hundreds of failed experiments, one military scientist finally cracked the food code. It was called the Doomsday Ration, and its recipe was kept secret for decades. With it, you could keep an adult well-fed for just 37 cents a day. Our government ended up stockpiling huge amounts of Doomsday Rations in shelters all across the country for a war that never came. But this food didn't spoil, and it was eventually put to good use. Over 150,000 tons worth of Doomsday Rations were unearthed and sent for emergency relief all over the world. Even today, more than 60 years later, full boxes are being discovered from time to time. They're still completely edible.
They still look fine.
Oh my God.
They taste like matzos.
Really?
Yeah, they're good.
But this is just one of the 126 survival foods that you can find in the Lost SuperFoods. In this book, you will discover not just the recipes of this long-lasting food, but full instructions with pictures as well as long-term storage and nutritional values. Today, I would like to share with you the one ingredient you need to make your own Doomsday Rations, but also some other powerful lost foods that you will find in this book. But first, let me tell you why you should even listen to me in the first place. My name's Art Rude. I was a math teacher for most of my career, and I helped my students learn many skills that were helpful in their careers. But I've always been concerned about the skills not taught. I like to think of myself as being a logical person, and I tend to pass everything through the filter of reason, even things that most people take for granted. Maybe you can relate to me in that sense. One of the things I realized how vulnerable we've all become compared to our grandparents' generation. Let me explain. The most important and valuable thing in life is our time. It's our only real currency. We spend time at work and get paid for it. When you go buy a new car or a sofa, you pay with the number of hours you work to get the money you need. For any of the goods we possess right now, we paid with tiny bits of our lives. The shirt on your back, your TV, the device that you're watching the short video on. Money is nothing but valuable pieces of your time that you pay for the final goods you really need. Like food, for example. But during the time when our grandparents lived, people used their time in a very different way. They didn't keep most of it as paper money in the bank or plastic in their wallets. Instead, they kept it as long-lasting foods and other vital items inside their root cellars and pantries. Many of them had enough put away to feed their family for a whole year, sometimes more. That's what made them so resilient to any crisis, and why even at the height of the Great Depression, you would struggle to find a single American household that starved. But how many of us today have that kind of stockpile to fall back on? All we have is money and supermarkets, where we exchange that money for food and other essentials, which is okay as long as money keeps its value, and if a disaster disrupts our increasingly fragile supply chain. Otherwise, most supermarkets have only 3 days worth of food, which will disappear even faster when people begin to panic. But money is only good as long as people agree it is. It has no value of its own, and in a crisis, it quickly becomes worthless. You can't eat paper. But good, nutritious food that doesn't spoil will always keep its value, no matter what happens to the world around us. The bottom line is this: as long as you keep all your time stockpiled as paper, stocks, bonds, gold, or anything that doesn't have a basic survival value, you are vulnerable and may find yourself at the mercy of others. Most of us today rely only on what we've got left in the fridge, thinking we can always go buy some more. But that's a big mistake, as recent history has proven time and again. During the 1941 siege of Leningrad, over 2 million people were trapped inside the city. Boris Novakovic was one of them. As rations quickly plummeted for everyone, but especially for the old and weak, his fate looked sealed. But Boris was no ordinary old man. Like many of us today in the U.S., he didn't expect something bad would happen. But unlike common folk, he also knew that a wise man always put something away in times of plenty. Before the war, Leningrad was a lively city with a bustling economy. Food was both cheap and readily available on every corner, more or less like we're experiencing right now. So Boris, not a rich man by any means, was able to turn a small part of his tiny state pension into something more tangible. His neighbors used to mock the old fool behind his back as he haggled for a better price at the market. But despite that, Boris went on to purchase food items and over the years built an impressive stash. As the city turned wretched and money became useless, people started trading boxes full of jewelry, gold watches, and expensive fur coats for just small pieces of bread. Sometimes not even enough for a single meal. In contrast, Fat Boris, as he became known, did quite well for himself during the 3-year famine. He was actually pretty thin and only got that nickname because his well-fed body stood in stark contrast with the starving people flowing through the streets of Leningrad. He even helped others nurse themselves back to health. Food was often the best and only medicine needed back then. The story of Fat Boris is not unique or even that rare. In starvation-stricken Leningrad and throughout other crises, like our own Great Depression, you can always find a few others like him, prudent, wise folk, who by stockpiling the right foods at the right time were able to survive and help their families do the same. Many others starved, probably still waiting for government help to arrive. The best time to put food aside is now. If Boris had waited until the danger was near, he would have had nothing left to stockpile or barter with later on. He would have been no better off than the rest of his starving neighbors. Just as we won't be if we decide to wait until the last minute. There will rarely be any warning signs. Do you think people knew the stock market would crash even a day before it did in 1929? Ushering in a 10-year economic depression? Or that millions of Chinese trapped inside Wuhan by their own government saw it coming until it was already too late? Of course they did. Chances are we won't see the next crisis before it hits us either. And when things go really bad, or even during a local disaster like a hurricane, one of the first things to vanish or become prohibitively expensive is food. So you need to stockpile it beforehand. But it has to be the right kind of food. Nutrient-rich and long-lasting without refrigeration. That's because in no decent crisis did people suffer from hunger but still have electricity left. I know it's hard to believe, but the best survival foods still come from a time when refrigerators were a distant dream. Nobody has to reinvent the wheel. It's been done before and so much better too. So don't rush out and sink thousands of dollars into a freeze dryer just yet. And don't stock up on emergency food buckets, even if you find them on sale. They are nothing but a clever scam that gives you 1,200 calories a day, about as much as prisoners got at Auschwitz. They contain barely any fat, vitamins, or the protein your body requires to stay healthy and strong. Please don't go buy a pantry full of MREs either. Eaten for more than a few days, MREs destroy your gut flora and prevent your body from properly absorbing nutrients. All you really need are the lost foods that Boris and others like him survived on during dark times. The foods of our grandparents. The problem is that since refrigeration went mainstream, these foods have become almost lost to history. There are only a few old-timers scattered all over the world who still make and stockpile them in their pantries. The sad truth is, the knowledge of making these superfoods that saved so many lives will probably disappear with them. And neither we nor the next generation will have them in our times of need. That's why we need to save these superfoods before it's too late. With the help of a team of passionate historians and preppers from around the world, We were able to gather every recipe inside a unique book. It's called The Lost Superfoods, and it contains all the lost superfoods that have been saving countless lives throughout human history, from the age of the pharaohs up through the age of exploration and the pioneers until the end of the Cold War. All with complete recipes and color pictures for every step to help you make and add them to your survival pantry. These are the most nutrient-rich and inexpensive foods you can make at home, with a confirmed shelf life of between 3 and 60 years or more, even without refrigeration. So without further ado, here are just some of the foods you'll discover inside the Lost Superfoods. First, you'll discover how to make your own U.S. secret military superfood at home. And the one ingredient that is vital for the doomsday ration and many other long-lasting superfoods as well, that ingredient is bulgur. Modern scientists discovered the ancients already knew. Bulgur is a perfect food in terms of nutrients, taste, and most importantly, shelf life. Edible bulgur has been found inside Egyptian pyramids after more than 3,000 years. The doomsday ration might have cost millions to invent, but it's super cheap to make or replicate. Once you've made your first batch, get ready to forget about it, because this superfood will never spoil, even in the harshest conditions and even without refrigeration. You'll always be able to keep your entire family well fed just by spending a few dollars each day. Plus, it's also lightweight enough that it belongs in your bug-out bag too. Next, you'll discover one of the foods that kept Fat Boris and the others well fed while famine gripped the city around them. It's a forgotten European dish that comes from a time when people had to get creative about preserving their food. To make it, Boris used cow feet, which you could afford, but you can use any type of fresh meat you like. The cheaper, the better. In the end, you'll have a scrumptious meal that requires no refrigeration for months and even years in some conditions. Pure protein and saturated fat that will keep you going as others wither away on grass and ruts. Next, I'll give you the recipe for the survival food that saved the Europeans during the Dark Ages, and especially as the Black Plague was ravaging the countryside. Many are thought to have survived because the vital nutrients in this complete food fortified their bodies against disease. Later, it nourished kings, children in Victoria workhouses, and even the Confederate General Richard S. Ewell, who ate it almost every meal. All the ingredients needed to make it, such as dried wheat berries, will last for a very long time in your pantry or cellar. They are also ignored by practically everybody else. So if you ever, God forbid, lose your entire stockpile, you can be sure you have at least this one superfood left. You'll also discover the Viking superfood that doesn't spoil but only gets better with age, like wine. This is what the first Viking explorers ate when they crossed the Atlantic and discovered North America, almost 500 years ahead of Christopher Columbus. The people of Norway still use this old recipe to keep all kinds of fish good for up to 3 years. I'll also show you another superfood that will give you all the healthy and vital fats your body needs in a crisis without needing any refrigeration. Rich in butyric acid, it will also help with absorbing the maximum amount of nutrition from any other food by healing and protecting your gut lining. You'll also find out how to use this lost superfood to turn a simple bag of potatoes into one of the most nutritious and inexpensive crisis meals to ever touch your taste buds. This one saved an entire village of Swedish farmers in 1869 when heavy avalanches blocked off their only road down the mountains for months. The next superfood you'll discover kept America from starving during the height of the Great Depression. It lasts for about 2 years without refrigeration, and the lard it's kept in can also be used for cooking, for making soap, for treating burns, or as an added fat source whenever you need it. You'll also discover a type of long-lasting bread developed by the Cree tribe of Canada when faced with starvation after the buffalo were hunted to the brink of extinction. All you need are 4 very common ingredients and maybe half an hour of your time. Plus, the way it's cooked will surely make you smile and think back on your own childhood. This bread is all you need to get energy-boosting carbs into your crisis diet. I'll also reveal the one food that saved more American lives during our Civil War than any other. Surprisingly, it's not hardtack, but it's probably just as long-lasting. This food contains something most people throw away. It's something they never even think of as real food to begin with. But you will, and I promise you'll profit a great deal from it in any disaster that empties the stores. You'll also find out how you can preserve almost any kind of cheese at room temperature. It's no secret that cheese has been around for a long time, a lot longer than refrigeration. But it was the Dutch of Alkmaar in the 14th century who invented the best way to store cheese in the pantry for more than 2 whole years. You'll also discover the superfood that helped the Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan march all the way to the gates of Vienna. Besides preventing nutrient deficiencies, this food is also the best natural probiotic that you can get, one that will counteract eating processed foods like MREs. This raw superfood was also adopted by the Royal British Navy at the end of the 17th century and has prevented countless deaths from scurvy since that time. Next, I'll show you a simple yet ingenious system that can allow anyone to put more than 295 pounds of good food each year while spending no more than $5 a week. It's especially useful if you've been struggling to find the money to put into a long-term food stockpile. You'll also get the recipe for a coated meat that fueled the conquest of the Ottoman Empire for centuries and prevented them from starving, even when the scorched earth strategy was deployed against them. You can't afford not to have this one in the pantry before the next crisis. I'll also show you how to make the portable soup that saved Lewis and Clark on their iconic 2-year expedition across uncharted United States territory. This weird-looking soup is no gourmet meal, but it will last for ages just by sitting in your coat pocket, no matter how hot it gets outside. I'll also show you why, as long as you can peel the bark off this tree, you'll never have to fear starvation. And the best part is it grows on almost every street in America. I'll also show you how to make fermented soup people from Turkey used to survive when crops failed for 3 years in a row. This food is called tarhana. And unlike any regular soup, it will stay good for years on your shelf as the fermentation process kills all dangerous bacteria. It's also a great source for almost every one of the essential B vitamins. You'll also find out how to make your own ninja superfood. This one kept elite assassins well fed on their month-long covert missions when fresh foods and even drinking water was hard to come by. Extremely few people in the world still know the recipe, and I had to beg and bribe an old Japanese fisherman in Okinawa to share it with me. Once he did, I was surprised to discover that every ingredient needed can be easily procured in America as well. You'll also see how the Brits kept their stockpiled eggs from spoiling after Nazi bombs took out their power in most cities. Using this time-tested method will keep one of nature's most perfectly designed and nutrient-packed foods from spoiling for up to a whole decade without refrigeration. I'll also show you the amazing protein-rich soup the Iroquois tribe invented using 3 of their sacred plants. By making use of their polycultural technique, you can grow them using just 4 feet of space, as these plants are like sisters that help each other grow much faster. Next, you'll learn how to make poor man's steak. This one comes from the Amish people, who are experts when it comes to live a good life without electricity. It's a protein-rich dish, and just like the name implies, anyone can afford to make it. I'll also reveal the exact way the Amish used to stockpile it for a few years in their pantry. Another food you discover inside the Lost Superfoods comes from the wind-swept plains of Mongolia. This distinctive dish of boiled and dried dairy curds is how herders preserve the milk of their animals. It can last for many months without being refrigerated and is the perfect source of vitamins and nourishment for a nomad in winter, or for a prepper during any kind of crisis. I'm also going to teach you how to make Mountaineer's tuna stroganoff, which is one of the most satisfying survival foods ever invented. It'll fill your belly and it's a snap to prepare. The next thing you'll find out about is not food. It's what to do with all your food once the power goes out. Many Americans are throwing away hundreds of pounds of meat and other life-saving meals during the blackouts because they don't know what you'll discover on page 291 of this book, The Lost Superfoods. You'll also discover how to make fruit leather, the long-lasting solution for keeping all your fruits from spoiling, which they tend to do in a hurry, especially when left outside the fridge. This will keep them good for months on end, and no one will ever suspect it's real food. Only you will know. I'll also give you the recipe for my delicious dehydrated marinara sauce that brings intense flavor to even the most boring of dishes. This one brought me more praise than anything else. It's a very old recipe that got passed down for generations. Store a few jars of this sauce in your pantry and no food will ever seem unpalatable. The next thing you'll discover is how our ancestors were able to preserve half a pig for one whole year without refrigeration. Their time-tested method is revealed in minute detail on page 262 of the Lost Superfoods. I will also reveal the glass jar method that will allow you to store the African equivalent of jerky called biltong for so long you'll probably forget where you stored it. This method removes all the moisture even further as time passes, while the meat will keep its texture, nutrients, and flavor intact. I'll also show you how to get the most calories for the least weight and space. I call it my Life Bar because it provides over 2,400 calories and feeds you for the whole day with just one serving. I keep a 3-week stockpile in my bug-out bag for my entire family of 4. And it all cost me, well, maybe $100 and a bit of time. All the ingredients are incredibly long-lasting, so they'll keep for years in there. I'll also reveal the dehydrated chili bean soup my family and neighbors used to beg me for. A long time ago, I had decided to build my stockpile around as many tasty foods as possible, without sacrificing on shelf life. This dehydrated chili bean soup is long-lasting, incredibly satisfying for your belly, and also sure to bring everyone's spirits back up in your household, even as chaos rages outside. You'll also find out how to feed yourself for a whole month just using $100 at Walmart while it's still open. The wild-growing superfoods that almost nobody knows about, the ins and outs of canning both vegetables and meat safely for 20 years, how to prevent your foods from going rancid, 7 deadly canning mistakes to avoid like the plague, how to make yourself a $20 do-it-yourself food bucket better than anything on the market today, the best 50 foods to dehydrate for your food stockpile, and many other survival superfoods and lost methods for preserving them for years on end. And even all of that is but a small taste of what you'll find in this book. The Lost Superfoods holds the survival foods that kept previous generations alive through the worst times. These superfoods are a must for anybody who's serious about protecting their loved ones from famine and disease when things turn ugly in America and there's no food left anywhere. With this book on your shelf, you can banish the fears of starvation for good. And there is even more, because if you act right now, you'll also get 2 other reports for free. The first one is called An Underground Year-Round Greenhouse in Your Backyard, and it's made for people with limited space available in their backyards. Not only do you get your 3 meals a day a lot cheaper, but we get them no matter what the weather outside looks like. Rain or shine, our year-round greenhouse puts food on the table. It's a perpetual food garden hidden from sight. And it could be yours too. All it takes to build is a couple of days of leisurely work and around $200 in raw materials. It's called the year-round greenhouse because you get 2 harvests per year, and you might even get 3 or 4 depending on your local climate. I'm sure you can also see that besides being the only garden that you can really count on, the underground year-round greenhouse literally puts money in your pocket in the long run. All that while being completely invisible to outsiders or to government watchdogs. The second bonus you'll get is called Projects from 1900 that will help you in the next crisis. 100 years ago, people were a lot more self-sufficient than your average American today. They had backyard medicine gardens, smokehouses, root cellars, wells, charcoal to purify water, and traps for wild game and fish alike, just to name a few. You see, food is just one part of the survival equation. Maybe the most important one, this bonus will give you everything else you need to make it once society breaks down. A way to get water, build a shelter, secure your property against looters, and so forth. If you choose to get the Lost Superfoods right now, I'll also send you these 2 exclusive bonuses that would normally cost about $27 each for free. You'll also get direct access to our members area and our email, where you can ask our team anything about making and preserving survival foods. But first, let me ask you something. How much is you and your family's food security worth? People in Leningrad paid small fortunes, jewelry, gold, and diamonds for just a handful of crumbs. What do you think they would have given to have all of Smart Boris's foods and other superfoods found in this book before the crisis? Anything. But I don't want to get rich off of selling this book. I want to prevent as many Americans as possible from starving in the next crisis. Some friends and neighbors of mine who saw the first edition and ate some of the survival foods told me I'd be a fool to price it for less than $100. You know what? Maybe I am. Because today you can get the Lost Superfoods plus the 2 bonuses for a one-time payment of just $27. But the only way to get it is to click on the big button below this video. Like I told you before, my greatest reward is to see as many Americans as possible add these survival foods to their pantries before it's too late. Before the next crisis empties our stores and our Walmart food spoils in broken refrigerators. Before we starve and have to see our loved ones suffer. And I am so convinced that this book will change your life that I'm also willing to extend to you our honor guarantee. I learned long ago that a man is only as good as his word. And because I always put my money where my mouth is, I'm willing to shoulder the risk on this one for you. So click on the button below. Go through the Lost Superfoods at your own pace. And when you're done, you have to be 100% thrilled and happy with this deal. If for any reason at all you feel this book did not deliver, or you want to get your money back, you will get it within 24 hours from the moment you send my team the request. You don't even have to answer any questions. Simply send a quick email in the next 60 days and ask for a refund. That's right. You have 2 months to test drive the Lost Superfoods and enjoy the 2 bonuses that come with it. This is my personal honor guarantee to you. So is it a deal? I hope so. Now I've done my part. The rest is totally up to you. The way I see it, you have 3 options here. First, you could choose to disregard everything I've told you and blindly trust that America will not face a crisis and that food will always be plentiful, no matter what. But even smaller emergencies, like hurricanes and tornadoes or blizzards, show that is a false assumption. Food is always hoarded as people panic. And unless you want to fight tooth and nail for the last can on the shelf with someone twice your size, you need a better way. You could also try to get all these lost recipes on your own. Trust me, it's a gargantuan task. We were only able to accomplish it because of our dedicated team. And it still took years to track down the few old-timers who still remembered how to cook these extremely powerful survival superfoods. So if you've got thousands of dollars and months of free time to spare, you can try to do it yourself. But the best way, I think, is to take advantage of this unique offer I'm putting in front of you today. We've done the work, so you don't have to. All the survival foods your family will ever need to stay well-fed and healthy during the worst of times are inside the Lost SuperFoods. These are the foods that saved countless lives during famines and food shortages, and they'll do the same for you and yours should the time come. It could be tomorrow, or it could be 5 years from now. We never know when a crippling crisis is going to hit until it's too late. Of course, in a crisis, you'll eat anything sooner or later. But why not eat something that not only fills your belly, but also lifts your spirits? So there you have it. Stay well-fed and prosper like Fat Boris and others like him by taking advantage of the ingenuity and resourcefulness of countless generations that have come face to face with starvation and widespread food shortages and lived to tell the tale. I've saved every superfood that saved them for you inside the Lost SuperFoods. All you need to do is click the Add to Cart button and start building the most inexpensive yet highly nutritious and long-lasting food stockpile you could ever imagine. I believe there are only a few moments in life that can change it for many, many years to come. This may be one such moment for you and your family. Although when food is still available, you might not realize it. I really hope you'll make the right choice here and add the most powerful survival foods in history to your bookshelf today and in your pantry tomorrow. There's never been a better time in our history to do it. God bless you and your family. From your friend, my name's Art Rude.